What's going on, everyone? So today we got a pretty fun one with some aggro Cassian yellow. This is a deck that a lot of people were extremely fond of in set 1, and in set 2 we kind of even get to really hit home with the strategy of being able to guarantee a lot of that 3 damage because we are really committing to the space arena and trying to go all in on just getting in that damage wherever we can. It's pretty sweet and has a similar line as something like a Sabine yellow, but because we're going to be drawing extra cards, we're going to be able to flood the board even more and hopefully leverage some really nice cards that are coming in from set 2. Now, before we talk about the deck, I want to mention 2 things. I have a TCG player link in the description down below. Be sure to use it if you want to pick up any of the cards today. And secondly, big thank you to my Patreons. They have been awesome. We've been talking a lot in the Discord. If you want a chance to join, be sure to check links in the description down below. So Cassian yellow, for those of you that don't know, Cassian's got a 1-costed action. If we've dealt 3 or more damage to an enemy base, we can go ahead and exhaust the leader and draw a card. Now, this is really quite powerful if you're able to leverage the additional cards, and that can be sometimes tricky to do in Star Wars Unlimited, and it's one of the reasons why Cassian hasn't really shown up as one of the strongest leaders, but still is able to do something, which is kind of nice compared to some other leaders that are really down in the dumps. Now, he does flip for 6 resources as a 4/6 Saboteur and gives you the ability to draw some cards on the flip side, but really what we're trying to do is guarantee some early damage and then try to draw into some of our powerful events to guarantee even more damage later on. So what do we got going on? What are some new spots that we got for cards, and what are we used to seeing? So in terms of what we're used to seeing in Cassian yellow, we got ourselves some early 2 resource plays: Green Squadron A-Wing, Sabine Wren, Alliance X-Wing. I mentioned this is more space focused deck, but we do have some ground units along the curve because, well, in some cases some of our ground units are just finishers, like, well, we'll talk about Cassian in just a moment and the unit Cassian. But the A-Wings, X-Wings, great early space units. X-Wings, I guess, one of our weaker ones, but does just give us another rebel unit in the air because we do have a little bit of a rebel theme. Sabine Wren, also a rebel, and also one of the most powerful 2 resource plays in the ground. We also have Red 3, Millennium Falcon, Wing Leaders, and Fleet Lieutenant in our 3-drop slot, all of which are extremely powerful. In Red 3, Wing Leader, and Fleet Lieutenant's case, we're really looking for some other synergy to go alongside them. Red 3 works with any heroism unit, but Fleet Lieutenant and Wing Leader specifically work with rebel units. Now, just to give you an idea, we have a total of 11 turn 1 rebel plays. So we are very frequently going to be able to curve into Fleet Lieutenant or Wing Leader should we choose to do so. We also have Cassian, but he's kind of like a 5-drop because he can come down and ready up immediately if we don't have anything else to do, I suppose, or if we want to just potentially surprise our opponent with some damage. In our 4-drop slot, we got K2, Liberator Gunship, and Valiant Assault Ship. K2, really powerful, also a rebel unit, gets in for some direct damage a lot of the time. Ozatech Gunship has an ambush ability, which really is nice if your opponent ever decides to play something like 3 toughness units, which is very common. You know, your TIE Phantoms, this can just kill your opponent's A-Wings if they went that direction, etc. Valiant Assault Ship, this is actually surprisingly good to get in some really nice amount of damage. In some cases, you'll stop at 4 resources and not even bother trying to get to Cassian and just relying on the Valiant Assault Ship to kind of close out the game and then continue to put units on the board. We have 1 copy of Kira as well in the 4 resource plays, just to get a little bit of hand disruption. In some cases, it's not going to be as useful because we don't really commit to the ground as much, and so she can be killed. But for important turns, this can come down and be a menace. And then lastly, we got ourselves some Millennium Falcons to close out the game and to give us a little ambush unit to deal with some of those hefty space units. I don't think I talked about it, but we also have a Y-Wing here in our 2 resource slot as another rebel unit to get some extra damage. It oftentimes hits their base for 3 because you don't really want to be dealing 2 damage to a unit that they control. And lastly, we have the Cartel Turncoat on turn 1. For 1 resource, which is oftentimes not going to be on turn 1 because we want to go like 2-drop into 2-drop, 1-drop. But 2/3 has that bounty. Not a rebel unit, so you don't really want to be playing it on turn 1 because you miss out on those rebel synergies. And then in terms of events and other random stuff that we've got going on, we do have Metal Ceremony, just 2 copies. This is a nice way to use some additional resources that we have with Cassian. We have 3 copies of Swoop Down, one of the best additions in set 2. This allows us to kind of control the ground arena while going heavy on space, so that we actually can leverage things like, well, if we want to, Fleet Lieutenant's damage, K2's damage, etc. It also just most of the time will be a free kill, with the exception of like we don't get to hit their base, but 1 resource to kill an opponent's ground unit is pretty strong. Surprise Strike gets in for some damage to their base. And lastly, for a causes to kind of close out the game should we need to deal some direct damage. There's only, 6 cards in the deck that do not work for 4 cause, and that is Swoop Down and Surprise Strike. So not an insane amount of cards to hit 4 damage, but very frequently going to be hitting like 3.5. So that's gonna be the list, guys. So we're gonna be diving into Cassian, see if we could draw some cards and see if we can hit home. Let's dive into it. Okay, so we got ourselves a game 1 here against Kira Green. Now this seems like a pretty reasonable hand. We could easily resource this Cassian in one of these gunships. Now normally the Kira Green deck is a little bit more controlling and trying to really leverage just the fact that her flip is kind of like an event and clears the board a little bit more. So we're just going to try to get in as much damage as we possibly can. And the Y-Wing here into the Fleet Lieutenant is going to be a nice start to do so. Now here, they've got themselves a high-low bond enforcer. So if we were to go Fleet Lieutenant in this spot, what's going to happen is they could just kill it with the high-low bond enforcer, which is a little bit unfortunate. So there might be potentially something else that I could do to try to get in some more damage, like maybe playing a Millennium Falcon, or I could go, Fleet Lieutenant plus Millennium Falcon and Cartel Turncoat next turn. We're going to go ahead and just attack with the Y-Wing. If they choose to deal some damage to their high-low bond enforcer, then we will play the Fleet Lieutenant next turn. Okay, so they're just going to allow the high-low bond enforcer to take some damage. In that case, I am going to... Do I want to play Millennium Falcon? They have 3 resources. There could be like a Power of the Dark Side. I could just draw a card with Cassian, but I think I just want to get in for the most amount of damage. I'm going to play a Millennium Falcon here. And so essentially what happened here is we got rid of their shield by attacking with the Y-Wing, but we didn't get in for as much damage. Let's go ahead and attack in with Millennium Falcon. They're going to resupply, and we're going to move on over to the next round. Do we want to pay 1? I think we do. And let's go ahead and exhaust the Millennium Falcon. Doesn't really matter. We're going to go ahead and resource probably this. I like the Wing Leader. I think I'm going to resource this Liberator Gunship, because I could go 3 resource play into 3 resource plus 1 resource play next turn, which looks pretty good to me. So that's what I'm going to do. Most likely going to play a Fleet Lieutenant, but there is a chance I play a Wing Leader. If they go more heavy on the ground, that is an option for me. I think because they went with the resupply, I am just going to go, well, they could have like a Super Laser Blast. So I'm just going to go Wing Leader here and try to get in for extra damage. Now, remember, if they do go Super Laser Blast, that's okay. Because, well, we do have a lot of cards in hand, and we're going to be able to go ahead and, draw some additional cards with Cassian. So we just have to try to close out the game afterwards. But it seems like they're ramping and probably going to just drop a Super Laser Blast to recover on board. Let's go ahead and get in with Millennium Falcon. They're playing Kira, which I'm really not that scared of, to be honest. Them playing Kira is a pretty good sign for us. Let's go ahead and pay 1 to keep the Millennium Falcon running. And I think I'm going to resource one of these swoop downs, because if they are going to be going Super Laser Blast, then realistically, the only thing that we need to worry about is, well, them actually getting in for some more, Kira getting in some damage, and then they're probably just going to go ahead and, let Kira die with Super Laser Blast. If they don't have that, then it's going to be hard for them to kind of recover on board. They have a Power of the Dark Side. I will just get rid of this Millennium Falcon. I'm going to go ahead and play a Fleet Lieutenant to attack in for 4 here. And here they could attack the Fleet Lieutenant. If they do, that leads me to expect that they don't have another Super Laser Blast, or don't have a Super Laser Blast. Let's go ahead and attack in with the Gray Squadron. And now they can attack us for 6 with the Kira, which is okay. The question is, do I want to go ahead and draw a card with the Cassian, or just take initiative to guarantee some additional damage? And I think in this spot, again, one of the only ways that we can really lose is if they have a Super Laser Blast. Let's go ahead and just get in for guaranteed damage. Valiant Assault Ship, well, they have more resources than us, but I think we just resource this X-Wing and rely on potentially multiple plays. So let's go ahead and immediately attack with the Y-Wing. If they do 2 damage to Kira, that's fine. And it looks like they do, so they probably have a Super Laser Blast, is what I'm expecting in this spot. And not casting it would be a little bit strange. Not using it, casting, not actually a word of this game. Because if they try to pass, then we will attack with the Wing Leader. And if they pass again for the Cassian flip, then we just take initiative. Like, we know they have Super Laser Blast here. Them passing is, well, not a good play, in my opinion, because we just guarantee our 2 damage in. Like, think about it. If they have another Super Laser Blast this next turn, well, they could have potentially lived. They stalled to try to get greedy, and we got in the 2 damage, and that ended up closing out the game. So I think that was a mistake from our opponent. Kind of not, it's like a 3-tiered step, right? Like, I'm thinking what they have. They need to be thinking about what I am thinking about they have. And because they didn't, and they try to get in some extra value by me like flipping Cassian or like Wing Leader up my Wing Leader to get in more damage, they ended up, you know, well, losing out on 2 HP and losing the game. So who knows? Maybe they didn't have any realistic option because they didn't have another Super Laser Blast, but we kind of knew it was coming just based on how they were playing, and we still were able to close out the game. So pretty straightforward, honestly. On to the next one, and we got ourselves a really nice hand. A double 1-drop into red 3 hand is excellent, and because of that, I'm just going to resource my 2 other 2-drops because I plan on doing exactly that. We are fighting against the Bo-Katan deck here, which isn't likely to have had many space units, so I am really quite liking our spot. We get to keep the Surprise Strike, and doing double 1-drops in this deck is really not that bad in terms of, you know, amount of cards you're using, because of the fact that we have Cassian kind of recoup the cards that we end up playing here by drawing us additional cards. They have a nice start themselves. They have themselves a Ketsuonyo into Mandalorian Warrior, which is a nice one. And they probably are going to hit the red 3. I would be surprised to see them hit a Cartel Turncoat. But we actually got in for 6 damage, and they got in for 4, which is really quite nice. We could go Liberator Gunship. We could play K2. I think in this spot, I actually want to resource the Gunship. There's a chance I want to go Millennium Falcon plus draw a card off Cassian, because that's going to guarantee us the most damage. There's also a chance that I just want to play out a K2SO. Because they went with Razor Crest, I know exactly what I want to do, and that is draw a card with Cassian and then kill their Razor Crest with the Millennium Falcon. And I could have played the Liberator Gunship to do the same thing, because remember, red 3 is going to allow us to hit for 1 more. But, well, the Millennium Falcon actually just, well, costs 1 less, which is pretty important. Let's go ahead and attack in with red 3. They're going to attack with Mandalorian Warrior. We're going to get down to Millennium Falcon, and we are going to kill their Razor Crest, and then draw a card with Cassian, and we will pay 1. Do we want to pay 1? I think we do. Let's go ahead and pay 1, and we'll probably resource this Cassian unit. Now, they do have a bunch of damage on our units, so, okay. They're going to go ahead and play a Concord Dawn Interceptors, which is okay. We're just going to go ahead and get in for some damage here. Trade. And they're trying to like stall out the game a little bit here, which is totally fine. Totally reasonable to do. Let's go and immediately attack with red 3. And this is a kind of a fun little interaction. Well, they're going to go armed to the teeth, which means that we are going to Metal Ceremony the red 3 to keep it alive from Bo-Katan action. If I were in their spots, I would have just gone ahead and immediately killed the red 3, because that is an extremely dangerous card to keep on the board. And we are looking to be in a pretty awesome spot here, because I'm going to Surprise Strike with the Cartel Turncoat, hit for 6. And now they have to take initiative. We're going to play a Cartel Turncoat, and we're going to draw an additional card. And it's going to be pretty tough for them to kill us. and we have a lot of space units. Red 3 staying alive, that extra point of damage is pretty nice here. And unfortunately, that red 3 just pumping up. Remember, this kind of represented the 3 damage from itself, but also 2 additional damage because we had that double 1-drop. So this essentially got in for 5 points of damage every single turn. Even though they had a pretty reasonable curve themselves, right? Ketsuonyu and the Mandalorian Warriors are a nice start, right? You attack for 4, you start pinging me down. The Razor Crest got immediately traded with because the red 3 was on the board. Them not having a really solid way to deal with my space units was a really big problem, and that's usually, again, the advantage of Cassian, which was pretty sweet. So on to the next one. Into our next matchup against Tarkin Blue. Pretty interesting deck here. This is a pretty terrible hand. Got ourselves half the hand events and a bunch of 3-drops, so definitely gonna mulligan that into a lot better of a hand. Here, I think it's pretty easy to resource. Well, I think I'm gonna resource the Valiant Assault Ship and one of the 2-drops. I think turn 1, we're going to go A-Wing. And then turn 2, we're going to be looking to play out a Cartel Turncoat. They ended up going with Inferno 4, so they have a space unit already, which the gunship can potentially go ahead and kill off, which is quite nice. Drew ourselves a Kira and a 4 Cause. So Kira is looking kind of mediocre here against the Tarkin Blue player. A little bit more controlling, I'm imagining, and probably not going to get as much value out of it. And I think 4 Cause here is going to be pretty important in terms of getting the damage in later on in the game. Now here they could give an experience token to their Inferno 4. Ooh, and our opponent played a Cell Block Guard, which is very interesting, as they are playing green, which means they should be playing Phase 3 Dark Trooper, since it's basically just better. But maybe they're playing all 8 copies or all 6 copies. So here I attack with the A-Wing into the Inferno 4, because if they had put an experience token on it or gone ahead and just attacked my A-Wing, it would have been really awkward because I would have just had to trade with it. But this gives us kind of a straight value and allows us to play out our A-Wing, kill their Inferno 4, which killed their turn 1 play. Even though we don't get in for damage, this is going to be the better play in the long run. Drew ourselves Surprise Strike and a Cartel Turncoat. I think in this spot, I'm actually going to resource the Liberator Gunship, because I don't imagine they're going to try to play an Inferno 4 into what I got going on over here. And I think what we'll do... Ooh, they have a TIE Advanced, huh? Okay. So TIE Advanced looks pretty good. They're going to go ahead and pump up their Cell Block Guard. Here, I think I am just going to attack their base for 3 and ignore this TIE Advanced. Let's go ahead and Surprise Strike in with the red 3, hit for 6. And I am going to get down both Cartel Turncoats and then pass. Drew ourselves a Wing Leader and an A-Wing. Now, one of the reasons why I decided not to go ahead and hit their TIE Advance with the A-Wing is because if they decide to kill the A-Wing, they get rid of, well, my A-Wing, of course, right? But they're not killing my red 3, and red 3 represents more damage here. And if they kill my red 3, then they just straight up trade. So it kind of puts the action on my opponent, which is really important. One of the big things in this matchup and in general is trying to kind of let your opponent take up as many actions as they possibly can. And look at that, they decided to trade with the red 3 anyways, which is what I expected. So this like idea of us potentially like wasting by not killing the TIE Advanced, well, doesn't even apply, because we kind of put the onus on our opponent to really try and kill my my red 3. We're gonna go and play a Power of the Dark Side. We're gonna go and kill our own Cartel Turncoat that was already exhausted. And the reason being is we are going to be playing a Wing Leader on this A-Wing, and that's going to give us some extra damage, so I do want to get in with the A-Wing. They're going to go ahead and power up their Cell Block Guard. It is now a 6/6, so Cassian will get one shot when he flips. We're going to see what our opponent decides to do. Looks like they gave a shield token to their Cell Block Guard. Honestly, none of that matters. We are really just caring about kind of the space arena, and we can ignore this 6/6 Sentinel that's shielded for the most part. They're going to go and ready up a Tarkin, and they are going to get in for a lot of damage, and we are under a lot of pressure, right? Like, this is not something that we can ignore entirely. We will eventually be in a spot where we do have to do something about it, but we have a bunch of threats in the air. We're going to attack for 5 immediately. And remember, for a cause is usually going to represent about 3 damage. At like typically the worst case scenario, they played a Power of the Dark Side, which is really not going to do anything because we can just defeat the A-Wing that we already attacked with. And then we're going to attack with Wing Leader, most likely. And that's going to finish out the game alongside the For a Cause. There's even a chance that For a Cause could just kill them at 26 damage on their base. Their Power of the Dark Sides, even though a very, very strong card in general, really not really doing all that much to prevent damage, which is what they were hoping to do. And look at that, For a Cause actually ended up hitting for 4 anyways, and that's going to be GG. So nice game, and their kind of Sentinel on the ground and Tarkin pumping it up really didn't mean all that much. I think they misplayed. In my opinion, they should have gone ahead and put an experience token on the Inferno 4 to start off. And what that would have done is I would not have been able to trade with the Inferno, or actually not even just trade. I would not have been able to kill the Inferno 4 without any repercussion. And then they would have had a threat in space. Anytime you see a heroism deck that's running like red, yellow, usually you're expecting a little bit of space units. And even if you're not like expecting that, just seeing an A-Wing on the battlefield and having the Inferno 4 and having the initiative means that you should be putting an experience token on that Inferno 4 so that you can trade or kill their A-Wing for free. Even if we have something to kind of trade off or even kill it, we're using that card and that action to kill your Inferno 4 rather than hitting your base. So I think that's like all bonuses. So I think if they had done that, then we probably would have had a good chance of losing the game, especially since we were not that far away from dying ourselves. Anyways, on to the next one. Into our next matchup, we got ourselves another match against Bo-Katan Blue. So second Bo-Katan Blue that we've seen today. Not gonna mulligan this. We've got ourselves a pretty nice hand, and I think I'm just gonna go all space here, as Bo-Katan Blue usually doesn't have that many great ways to deal with space units. And more importantly, because we have Wing Leader and Red 3, the one card that can be a little bit scary is the Concord Dawn Interceptors, but we're gonna be able to go ahead and actually fight through that, which is going to be pretty important. Now here, I could play the Wing Leader, but I'm actually just going to play out my Red 3 because they can deal a damage to my Wing Leader to kill it. So this is Red 3 is going to actually get in for more damage over time. And if they do play the Concord Dawn Interceptors, that's fine because I will just trade my A-Wing with their Interceptors. Now, they could be playing a more controlling version. They could have takedowns. They could have vanquishes. They could have Rivals Fall, Fell the Dragon, all that stuff. But it's not normal. And it looks like they have a Daring Raid. They're going to use that in conjunction with the Bo-Katan Ping to kill off my Red 3. So very, very nice play from them. It's going to actually end up giving them a lot of value here. They're going to ping off the Red 3. And hopefully they don't have another play afterwards, because that's where it gets a little bit, scary potentially. Swoop down looking a little bit weaker here because I'd rather go with multiple units. And also trying to swoop down a Ketsuonyo is really just not that powerful. Since they got rid of my Red 3, I'm looking to just play a bunch more units. Definitely going to play the X-Wing plus A-Wing here on this turn. And we're going to first start off with getting in with 3 damage. They could have some sort of combination of cards or just maybe a Sentinel or maybe just a way to kill my A-Wing that we're going to miss out on damage. So we do want to start off with that. They're going to Dark Saber their Ketsuonyo. So very powerful. They're going to start attacking for 7 here. And now we're kind of racing here for sure. We definitely don't want to be seeing this Ketsuonyo with 7 damage a single turn. They're going to deal 1 damage to one of my units afterwards. I don't even know if that's really necessary. They might have something to kind of benefit from that. Drew ourselves a bunch of cards here. For a Cause, K2. I think we just resource this K2. So I think what I'm going to do is just get in for 3 damage. And then attack for 3. And then Wing Leader attack for 4. And then draw a card off the Cassian. And then we can set up for next turn playing Millennium Falcon and For a Cause, which should be essentially another 6 points of damage on like a worst case scenario. I guess it could be like 0 points from For a Cause in the absolute worst case scenario, but that's normally not going to happen. They could have something that makes it so that we lose next turn. Like if they play a Podameron here, for example, that's going to be 8 damage. And that's going to be really quite rough. They're going to deal a damage to A-Wing. So they dealt 1 to each of them. I'm a little bit surprised on that one. I wonder what they have. Do they have like a make an opening here or something? Huh. I did not expect them to deal 1 damage to each of the A-Wings. I would have expected them to do 1 damage to a single A-Wing twice. But maybe they have something that I don't know will do 2 damage across the board. Like the thing I would immediately think of is Snoke, but they're not going to be playing Snoke. Armor are going to put some experience tokens down, which is pretty nice for them. They're definitely safe in the ground arena. And that attacks for 7-4, so that's 11 plus Bo-Katan. They are killing us next turn, which is really quite scary. But we drew ourselves Surprise Strike and Fleet Lieutenant, which are both very strong cards. Surprise Strike is probably one of our best draws here. Looks like they have a Rival's Fall, which is totally fine. So Surprise Strike hits for 3, and so does Millennium Falcon. So we're just going to attack in with our A-Wing for 6. And because they played Rival's Fall, we know that we are going to be able to end this game because we ready up a Cassian after they've attacked with Ketsu. And then we're going to be able to attack their base for 4 since this has Saboteur. Even if they were to get any sort of Sentinel going, that's no problem. And the reason why I attacked with Cassian after readying or readied up Cassian and attack with Cassian is because that's going to guarantee the 4 damage. And then we can finish off with the A-Wing, which is going to be guaranteed sources of damage. Because if I went A-Wing and then attack with X-Wing and then I flipped or Wing Leader and I flipped absolutely atrocious cards, like I flipped, I don't know, double Swoop Down, double Surprise Strike, we tactically would have lost. This is just the more guaranteed way of playing it. But that was really close. That Darksaber coming in was really scary. The fact that they played the Rival's Fall ended up just completely making me confident that we were going to win this game. There wasn't really anything they could do after they played that. But the really key card there actually was Surprise Strike because it saved us an action. If, let's say, we did not draw a Surprise Strike, what would have happened is I would have had to attack another unit and our opponent actually would have won because they would have been able to ready up Bo-Katan and attack us back. So that was really a close game, and the only way we actually won that was with that Surprise Strike. Now we could have won potentially with that Fleet Lieutenant also, but just something to keep in mind, that saving action is really, really important. Into our next matchup against Bossk Green. Now this hand's pretty weak, I would have to say. We do have 2 events. We do have a curve, but it's some of our weaker plays. I think that we can do a lot better, especially with how many early plays that we do have. We also have 3 events in our hands, so it doesn't give us that many options in terms of playing units. Now, we did draw ourselves into another triple event hand, but at least we do have, well, a curve. Now, even though I could keep the Cassian, I'm actually going to go ahead and resource it and resource one of the 4 causes because I do have a nice 2-drop here, and that's going to be the A-Wing. And then we're going to go ahead and attack in with our A-Wing here next turn. They're going to play a Bounty Hunter's Quarry after they play Dengar to actually go ahead and wow, what a freaking turn 1. Never mind. They went Dengar double upgrade, claim the bounty with Bossk's action. So this is probably one of the best turn 1 plays I've ever seen out of Bossk, and we drew double 4-drop, which is really just quite unfortunate. So our opponent had one of the most absurd turn 1s I've ever seen, and we had a pretty bad turn 2. One of our weaker options. But unfortunately, that's how the game goes sometimes. Really sick from our opponent, though. They had a guild target here to deal a damage to Sabine. And, well, they're going to be able to probably claim this bounty should they choose to do so. They can kill it with Toro if they want to. Nope, they're going to hit the base. Seems reasonable to me. We have drawn our 3rd for a cause, which we will resource at this point. So pretty awkward draws. And even though I could hit their base, we definitely have to hit the Dengar here because we really can't just be taking a bunch of additional damage and having our opponent deal a damage to us every single turn, or units with every single one of their bounties. This is a pretty high roll from our opponents, to be fair. one of the things that we kind of have to pay attention to, we're going to resource this for a cause, by the way, really not a good spot to use it, is they've had 1, 2, 3, 4 different bounties while also playing units at the same time, which is a little bit crazy, to be honest. Here, let's just go ahead and I could K2 kill Toro, or I could play out the red 3. I think I want to play out the red 3 here. And if they want to kill K2 with Toro, that's fine. There's a good chance that I'm going to be surprise striking their boss because I don't want them to just have Bosk on the battlefield the whole game. In that case, since they've played out the Bosk, we're just going to go ahead and surprise strike in with K2 to kill off their Toro. And then I'll make them discard a card, which might not seem like that great, but we kind of just want to get rid of the cards that they have in hand. They're going to have a punishing one. They're going to ready it up because we had an upgrade on our K2. To be honest, if I were in their spot, I would just be hitting our base. But we are in a really rough spot. It's just that turn 1. The turn 1 giving them a 3-drop on turn 1 and killing our unit is basically impossible to stop. Like, we can't really win after that point. And even if we were to ready up a Cassian here, get in with a Millennium Falcon, I suppose, like, there's just not really much that we could do there. I mean, I'm trying to think, like, maybe we put a Millennium Falcon in and we kill their punishing one with the red 3, but that's really one of our only options that we truly have. They're gonna rich reward what are they rich rewarding? Okay, that's fine. We're going to kill the punishing one. So rich rewarding the red 3 is actually not that powerful for them. So that's really good news for us, to be honest. And now we can swoop down with red 3 to kill Bosk alongside Cassian, or we could just bypass them. Let's go ahead and just deploy Cassian here. Oh, I should have drawn a card after attacking in. Well, that kind of gives me less options, so I'm okay with this. They're going to daring raid the Cassian, potentially. I'm curious what they want to do here. I think I want to attack into the base with Cassian because I'm interested in drawing a card. But they're sitting on this daring raid here. And remember, they still have ECL, which is a little bit scary. And they still could double claim a bounty. So we kind of want to keep the board clear if we can, because we're at 24 damage on our base. But our opponent's, trying to decide what they want to do with this daring raid. They could finish off the Millennium Falcon, which I think is reasonable. I think what I would do is probably, well, it depends on what cards they have in their deck and what they expect to draw. But I would lean towards potentially dealing 2 to either Cassian or red 3. Because if I want to attack Bosk here with Cassian, then it actually just kills my Cassian. So I don't have that option. And if you deal to red 3, then if Bosk ever dies, you get that 1 damage ping on the flip side. And also it sets up for, the bounty claiming here. Our opponent is thinking about it, I suppose. They definitely got to choose an option. Maybe they're lagging. That happens on Carabas sometimes. Maybe I should just type to them. Oh, never mind. It was lag. It took them a little bit, but they lagged. Oh, they daring raided our base. Okay, that makes a lot more sense, actually. I respect that option. Looks like they are going to try to end the game with Bosk, and we actually have the answer for it in red 3 plus the swoop down. But looks like we're lagging as well. A little bit slow gameplay here from Carabas. That's all good. I actually didn't even think about daring raiding our base, but I think that was absolutely the correct play from our opponent, because there doesn't really seem to be an obvious option of how we're supposed to deal with this Bosk. Now, we could have something like a surprise strike, but I think no matter what, they're pretty happy, even if we don't, or if their Bosk does get killed. They have a lot of draws, especially with ECL on the battlefield, that makes this very good for them. Now, fortunately for us, we do have the Medal Ceremony alongside the swoop down, so they can't even deal 1 damage to the red 3 afterwards to claim that bounty, which is going to be pretty nice. But once this lag goes away, a bit unfortunate. Where is... Oh. Opponent has disconnected. Okay, so opponent's disconnecting a couple times, and it looks like they just disconnected, I suppose. But that was a pretty close game. I think that we would have had a very good chance of just losing here, but we did have a chance. We were going to be able to kill Bosk, and then we were going to be able to go ahead at Metal Ceremony, which would have been left with a 5-3 Cassian and a 3-2 red 3. And then we could have readied up a Cassian from our resource pile, and we could have gone in for a lot of damage next turn and had a pretty good chance of just going ahead and kind of closing out the game amongst 2 turns. If they kind of drew poorly and drew their bounty half of the deck, that would have been pretty good for us. But they had ECL still, so there was a good chance that they had a lot of outs. I will say that was probably one of the most impressive turn ones I've seen. Dengar into double bounty. Remember, had it been a 1-cost bounty and a 0-cost bounty, or 2-0 costed, into hitting a 3-drop off of that bounty hunter's quarry. And that's what made it really strong, honestly. If they had like double guild target, it would have been like a whatever turn. But because they had the bounty hunter's quarry and got a 3-drop, which allowed them to kind of control the board, that's what made that scary. So anyways, I think we would have probably lost this game, but we had a chance. On to the next one. Into the next game against Boba Yellow, which is going to be a tough matchup. And we have mono 3-drops. Literally every single card in our hand is 3 resources. Double red 3, double 4 cause. Definitely going to be mulliganing this. We really needed a turn 1 play, and we did get one. So we got ourselves an A-Wing. We got ourselves a Cartel Turncoat, a Fleet Lieutenant. In this matchup, Wing Leader is going to be pretty weak. And honestly, I'm not a huge fan of Swoop Down either. I'm looking to go A-Wing into Fleet Lieutenant. Unfortunately for us, they kind of have a really good answer for this. They have the Mercenary Gunship, and we drew ourselves for a cause and Kira. So against a very tough matchup, and we've drawn pretty poorly. They're going to be able to kill my A-Wing with their Mercenary Gunship for essentially free, and then we just have to claim initiative. Now, the reason why Wing Leader is pretty weak in this matchup is what you're going to be seeing is a lot of waylays and things like that, bounce effects. So getting experience tokens is pretty weak. And as you see, I Wing Leadered up my Fleet Lieutenant, and they happen to have a Cunning. They're going to be pumping and then exhausting a unit. I think that was a very big misplay from them. They should definitely have gone ahead and bounced. I take it back. They can't bounce. So never mind. Good on our opponent. They went with the exhaust. We could steal the Mercenary Gunship from them, but that seems a little bit weak. I'm going to go resource this K2. I'm probably going to play out this Kira. Let's go Kira. They have Cunning. Oh, they have double Cunning. Okay, well, this is tough because they're going to be able to Syndicate Lackeys and kill my Kira. Oh, what a disgusting hand from our opponent. Never mind, our opponents just got the nuts. They have triple Cunning. They had the answer to my turn 1 play with a space unit. The only thing that was a little bit weak was their turn 2 when they went with Greedo. But I mean, that was insane. They have triple Cunning. I've never seen a more scary hand in my life. Let's go ahead and kill the Greedo here. We are kind of playing the more controlling route. They have Syndicate Lackeys. They're going to be killing my Kira here. That's fine. Let's go ahead and kill their Mercenary Gunship. They're going to deploy Boba. We're going to play a Cartel Turncoat. They're going to attack our base. We're going to attack for 2. And then they're going to claim initiative, it looks like, because they don't really have any other plays. We've drawn ourselves double X-Wing, and that was that. I forgot earlier that since we Wing Leadered up our Fleet Lieutenant, they couldn't bounce it with Cunning because it's 4 or less power. But now they have double Cunning, and I mean, there's not really much that we can do. They're going to pump up their Boba, and I mean, they're going to exhaust units. Like, they're going to get in for 8, even potentially even more. Like, it's just so doomed. Let's deploy a Cassian. There isn't really many other options that we have. They're going to attack for 5, and they're going to attack with Boba Fett for the last points of damage. So we just got absolutely brutalized by Boba. This is one of the best hands I've seen from Boba, though. Having the Syndicate Lackeys to ambush, having double Cunning if we don't have anything way to interact with our opponent, and having the turn 1 answer to our A-Wing, which made Fleet Lieutenant so much worse, made Wing Leader, if we had it, so much worse. That was just an absolute decimation. It's one of the reasons why Boba Yellow is good, guys. It is very good. So well played from our opponent. Again, they didn't make a mistake. If we didn't wing leader or fleet lieutenant, they could have bounced. But because we wing leadered, it had 5 power, so they had either exhaust or to discard a card at random after pumping, and well, they went with the exhaust, which I think is a totally reasonable option since they got to keep their Greedo around afterwards. Anyways, on to the next game. Up against Boba Yellow for our next next matchup. And we have a pretty nice hand here. We've got ourselves Cartel Turncoat into red 3, and we're going to resource this Metal Ceremony alongside this K2. Love this hand against the blue base decks because one of the ways that they really get ahead is by kind of just 1-for-1ing you across the board if you're trying to curve out, but playing multiple units on turn 1 kind of offsets that, so you're always getting in damage. And as I mentioned earlier, getting the red 3s down after going double turn 1 play is really quite strong. Looks like they have a top target to place on our Cartel Turncoat, and we've drawn ourselves Wing Leader and Millennium Falcon. So I'm actually going to resource the Surprise Strike because I'm looking to keep all my 3 drops. They're going to go ahead and power the dark side, and we're going to actually defeat the one with the top target on it because that's going to not heal them any HP. So pretty nice from us, or I guess not very nice from our opponent to top target and then not get any value from it. They essentially wasted that. I suppose they couldn't really do anything else, but just something that we can note here. Millennium Falcon and Cassian as our draws. Not exceptionally powerful, but again, Boba Blue tends to be a little bit more controlling, so I don't mind having some smuggling options. And we're probably going to be setting up to draw a card in this stage of the game. We're going to attack in with the Millennium Falcon and Cartel Turncoat, and we're going to draw a card with Cassian. They have a takedown, so they've gone again 1-for-1. Power the dark side and the takedown, and then we're going to draw a card. We're going to pay 1 to keep the Millennium Falcon running indeed. Exhaust that resource. Draw ourselves Metal Ceremony and Cassian. Really unexciting draws, to be honest. I'm going to go ahead and resource this Swoop Down since Swoop Down really doesn't have much of an effect on this in this stage of the game. They are going to deploy Boba. We're going to get in with Millennium Falcon since it deals an extra point of damage. We're going to then get in with Cartel Turncoat since it gets in for 2. And then we're going to draw a card and then figure out what we want to do. If we draw, I suppose there are a couple different things that we could draw. Let's go ahead and draw a card. It's a K2. So unfortunately, we didn't have that before because I would have loved to play it. But we're going to get down this Cassian unit. Even though it doesn't really do too much on the board, it is going to be pretty useful. It's going to keep or pay 1 to keep the Millennium Falcon running. And we've drawn ourselves another Millennium Falcon, which can be really good in this game, and a Fleet Lieutenant. Now, the Millennium Falcon, big Millennium Falcon that we have in our hand actually is pretty nice. I'm going to go and resource this Wing Leader, though, as I don't really see us getting too much value out of this. Syndicate Lackey is going to kill Cassian. Makes good amount of sense to me. Let's go ahead and attack with Millennium Falcon. They're going to Vigilance, defeat Cartel Turncoat, heal 5. So they're going to go up to 11. Let's go ahead and draw a card with Cassian. And then we're going to ready up Cassian and then attack in with Fleet Lieutenants, I think. And then I think we're going to Metal Ceremony. We could also Surprise Strike down the Boba, but I think what we want to do is just Fleet Lieutenant attack in for 6. And then I will Metal Ceremony the Cassian, since I don't really see it being all that advantageous to not. Drew ourselves another Millennium Falcon, so we have 2 in hand. And I do want to keep both of them, since they kind of are surprising amounts of damage. And I do want to keep big Millennium Falcon in hand because they can play like a Fet's Fire Spray, and we could potentially finish it off. Although that doesn't seem that strong either, but I do want to keep it in hand just to give me the option of ambushing something else. So they had a pretty nice hand. Nothing like too special, to be honest. Just a solid Boba Blue hand. You know, play a removal spell, play a removal spell, play a removal spell, ready Boba, play a unit, play a removal spell. Like, this is just kind of how this deck works. In general, control decks work this way. But they've had Vigilance, which is one of the more important cards in the matchup because it heals them 5. Remember, they'd be at 22 here if they just had like a Rival's Fall, for example. So that's really nice for them. They're going to attack my Fleet Lieutenant, which makes sense. I'm going to actually just attack in for 5 with Cassian to start us off. And we have a lot of cards in hand, which is pretty nice. So that is something to consider. We could play out a Cassian unit from our resource pile to get in for another 3 points of damage. But I think what we want to do here is get down a K2 and set up for our opponent potentially super laser blasting. I'm trying to think if I should have surprise striked or not. I'm starting to think that I should have on the Cassian just to guarantee the extra 3 points of damage. They're going to top target Cassian. So let's go and surprise strike with Millennium Falcon in for 6. And they could have a Rival's Fall for Cassian, which would heal them 6 points of damage. And it looks like they do. So nice recovery from our opponent. Let's play a K2. So they've had multiple ways of healing. Granted, the top target didn't heal them, but they had the second top target and the Vigilance. They've healed a total of 11 points of damage. And, well, that ends up being pretty nice for our opponent. Drew ourselves a bunch of cards. And I think what we do is probably resource one of these Sabines. There's a good chance that they'll have a Super Laser Blast this turn. And if they do, we win. Because we have Cassian in a resource pile, which gets in for 3. After K2 gets in for 3. Which I guess technically doesn't win. The second copy of Vigilance. So Vigilance doesn't actually kill any unit here. But it does heal. And they do get to put a shield token. We're going to go ahead and get in for 4 with our K2. And they're going to Entrenched, huh? Okay. Entrenched ends up being pretty good. Let's go ahead and Wing Leader up our K2. So I thought that they were going to go ahead and attack their K2 here, but Wing Leadering up K2 ends up being pretty good for us. And then we get to go Millennium Falcon, destroy our Millennium Falcon, attack in for 3, and then draw a card with Cassian, and then we'll pass. And we'll pay 1 to keep Millennium Falcon up and running. Drew ourselves a really nice one here in For a Cause, as well as another K2. So one of the only ways that they can really get out of this is they defeat all my units here with like a Super Laser Blast. But if they do that, remember we hit them with K2 for 3. We have a Millennium Falcon to follow it up. And we also have the For a Cause. So they Super Laser Blast. That's super easy. That's just For a Cause. And that's going to be the end of the game. So GG. Our opponent really hard fought. They had double Vigilance, double top target. They healed for a total of, what is that? 16 points of damage. They had Boba Fett on the battlefield the entire time. But unfortunately, they couldn't quite get there. And mainly, it's just usually these aggro decks are able to outpace a lot of the control decks, especially the hard control decks, which this seems to be a build that's more hard control. When I see things like Entrenched, really, I think hard control, because it's hard to run Entrenched in a deck that's trying to run a bunch of units. But I mean, if you look at what they played, double top target, a takedown, a Power of the Dark Side, double Vigilance, Entrenched, Super Laser Blast, Rival's Fall. All removal or healing. And the other card that they played is Syndicate Lackeys, which acts as removal in Boba Fett. And they had Boba Fett Leader, which ended up getting in for a lot of damage into our units as well. So pretty nice one, but we ended up getting there. It's really because of that early start. Like if we, I think our opponent potentially made a mistake with that, top target into Power of the Dark Side. Maybe they drew Power of the Dark Side afterwards, but they should have known that if they top target and then Power of the Dark Side, I'll just choose the one with top targets. It's the same units. But the turn 1 double cartel turncoat is what really changed that game, because if we go turn 1 just a single unit, then we are really behind. As one of the big things with these control decks is, and I said this early on, they 1-for-1 you. One removal spell, use all the resources, kill your units. And if you're playing on curve, that's really bad for you because you can't actually get in for a lot of damage. Now, Sabine gets past this because she can deploy early. Cassian doesn't deploy early, so you really need some really nice turn 1 plays. And double cartel turncoat is exactly what I'm looking for. Following it up with a red 3, also really kind of perfect curve. That's really what I'm looking for in basically every game. Double cartel turncoat, red 3. Maybe Wing Leader or Fleet Lieutenant or something, mainly Fleet Lieutenant to follow that up. Although red 3 is a little bit of a red flag for their opponent. They want to kill it. Anyways, really awesome game. And we ended up getting there. So what do we learn with Cassian? Well, we drew a lot of cards, we got in for a lot of damage, and it ended up performing really quite well. Now, in terms of, kind of what this list is really capable of and what we saw, I think every card kind of pulled their weight. The card that really didn't, or the cards I should say, that we really didn't get to see come into play were Swoop Down and Millennium Falcon. Now, the reason why I'm running Swoop Down is it's really a good card against a lot of the aggro decks, and we didn't really see too many aggro decks. We saw more mid-range or tempo decks, and unfortunately, Swoop Down doesn't really match up against them. And we even played against like some soft control matchups. The Millennium Falcon, and when I mean Millennium Falcon, I mean the big Millennium Falcon, the 6-costed one. Usually that card comes down against any sort of space matchup, which we didn't really see too much of. We didn't even see people go into space really at all. Or it just comes out as a smuggle opportunity later on in the game, but that didn't really come into play either. We mainly focused on the cheaper plays. I suppose we didn't really see Oztec Liberator Gunship do its thing. We did play it a couple times, but we didn't really see it ambush stuff. The Valiant Assault Ship, we did get in for that extra damage, but ended up being pretty useful. Fleet Attendants, of course, great. X-Wings, Sabine Wrens, Red 3s, like all these cards we know are great. And honestly, at the end of the day, this deck's just like a typical, red, yellow heroism aggro deck, except the addition of Cartel Turncoat makes this deck a lot scarier. And because we have the Y-Wing, because we have the Valiant Assault Ship, and because we have the Millennium Falcon, you have a way more consistent space focus, right? If you take away all those cards, then you're really, really trying and really, really having to kind of put more ground units in your list because there's just not that many space units to choose from set 1. So that's kind of what's changed with Cassian Yellow. And out of any list, the space units for Cassian end up being really important because they guarantee that you're able to draw some additional cards. I can't wait for set 3 to maybe change things up even more and have a lot of these aggro decks be able to go like double or like play 3 of copies of multiple 1-drop space units, right? Not just Cartel Turncoat, but maybe other ones as well. Because we've seen them be powerful, they're definitely not like completely broken. And heck, Cartel Turncoat's a common, and it's been pretty powerful in of himself. So, well, I'm hoping for more of that in the future. Anyways, guys, hopefully you enjoyed. This was a fun game, or fun set of games with Cassian Yellow. Shout out to anyone that shouted out to me. There was a couple of you that I played with, and we chatted afterwards, and I ended up getting in for some more games. So appreciate it. And also thank you to my Patreons. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I see you all